The text came at 6:14 in the evening, 3 days before Thanksgiving, and it was so warm it made my eyes sting. Mum, please come. The kids miss you. Stay the whole week. For 3 years, my son had answered my calls in two-word sentences, and now this. I booked the flight that same night. What I did not know, what nobody warned me, was that the invitation was not a door opening. It was a door already locked, with my coat still on the wrong side of it. I am Eleanor Hayes. I am 71 years old, and I have buried a husband and a great deal of pride, in that order. Walter passed 4 years ago, quietly, the way he did most things. He was an engineer. He worried about the future, the way other men worried about the weather, constantly, gently, with a pencil behind his ear. He worried that I gave too much. He worried that our son, David, was the kind of man who would always do whatever pleased the loudest person in the room. But Walter did not predict this. He could not have predicted that the people standing in that room would one day be the family his son married into, and that they would look at the land he left me the way a butcher looks at a cow. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me put you on that porch with me, in the cold, where it started. I flew into Minneapolis the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I paid for the ticket myself, of course. I paid for the gifts in my carry-on, 2 for each grandchild, wrapped in paper I'd ironed flat the night before because I am that kind of grandmother. I had even mailed a box ahead of me, 2 pumpkin pies frozen in dry ice, a tin of the spiced pecans David loved as a boy, and a small hand-knit blanket for Lucy, who was 9 and still let me call her my girl. I texted David from the gate. "Wheels up! See my babies soon." He sent back a thumbs up. That thumb was the last thing I would hear from him for almost 5 hours. The plane landed at 4:40. The sky was already going grey and mean the way northern skies do in late November, and I stood at the bottom of the escalator in baggage claim with my coat over my arm, watching for David's face in the crowd. He wasn't there. That was all right, I told myself. Traffic. I texted him. "Landed. I'm by Carousel 6. Nothing." I called. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called Whitney, my daughter-in-law, and hers didn't ring at all, straight to a recording, the phone off, or the call refused. I couldn't tell which. By 5:30, the carousel had stopped turning. The other passengers had all been gathered up by people who were happy to see them. I was the last one standing there, holding a coat I hadn't put on yet, because somehow putting it on would have meant admitting no one was coming. So here is the first thing I want you to wonder, the same thing I wondered, standing there under those flickering airport lights. They begged me to come. They said the children missed me. So where was everyone? I did what I have always done. I solved the small problem in front of me and saved the big one for later. I ordered a rideshare to their house in the suburbs. $41, I remember. Because I notice numbers, it's a habit Walter gave me. The driver was a kind young man named Omar who asked if I was visiting for the holiday. And I said, yes, my son's family. And he said that was beautiful, and I agreed that it was. And I looked out the window so he wouldn't see my face. David and Whitney lived in one of those new neighborhoods where every house is the color of oatmeal, and the trees are still young enough to need stakes. I knew the house. I'd visited twice before, back when Walter was alive, and the welcome was real. Omar pulled into the driveway, and I thanked him, and he drove off, and only then, standing on the curb with my suitcase, did the silence really reach me. The house was dark, not one window lit. The driveway was empty, no minivan, no David's truck. The porch light wasn't even on, and it was the kind of cold that gets into the joints of your hands within a minute. I rang the bell. I heard it chime inside, a hollow sound, the sound a house makes when it knows it's empty. I knocked. I waited. I knocked again. Harder. The way you do when you've stopped believing it will work, but your hand won't quit. There was a spot by the back step where they kept a spare key, under a flat grey stone shaped like a turtle. Lucy had painted eyes on it 2 summers ago. I went around in the cold, my breath smoking, and I lifted the turtle, and there was nothing under it but a dent in the dirt where the key used to be. They had moved it. Or taken it. Either way, the message was the same, even if I wasn't ready to read it yet. I sat down on the front step. I want to tell you I marched off and demanded answers, but that is not who I am, and it is not what works. I sat. I pulled my coat on at last, and I waited, and I counted, because counting keeps the panic in its cage. I sat on that cold, concrete step for 41 minutes before a porch light finally came on, not at David's house, but next door. A woman came across the dead lawn in a parka thrown over what looked like pajamas, holding a flashlight she didn't need yet. "Honey, are you all right? I saw you from the kitchen." She was maybe 60, round-faced and worried. "I think I might be at the wrong place," I said, though I knew I wasn't. "I'm David's mother, Eleanor. They asked me up for Thanksgiving." The woman's face did a thing I have learned to watch for. It folded, just slightly, the way a face folds when a person knows something unkind and is deciding how much of it to hand you. "Oh," she said. "Oh, honey. I'm Carol. I'm so sorry. They left this morning. Whole carload of them. David said they were going to Whitney's folks' place down in Rochester for the holiday. I helped them load the cooler." She paused. "Did they not tell you?" "No," I said. "No, they didn't." Now, you would think that would be the cruel part, and it was cruel. But the cruelty I could survive. What I couldn't yet see was why. Why fly an old woman across the country, mail her gifts, beg her to come, and then drive 2 hours in the other direction and leave the door locked behind you? People don't do a thing like that by accident. An accident leaves a key under the turtle. A plan takes the key away. Carol made me come inside her warm kitchen and put a mug of decaf in my hands. And while it steadied me, I took out my phone and did the thing I already dreaded. I opened Facebook. And there it was, posted 38 minutes earlier by a woman named Diane Patterson, Whitney's mother, a name I'd heard maybe twice in my life. A photo of a long dining table, candles lit. A turkey, already golden in the center of it. Though it was only the night before the holiday, a practice dinner, the caption called it. And around that table, David, carving, Whitney, laughing, my grandson Ben with his hair grown long, my Lucy in a dress I'd never seen, and at the head, a tan man in a sweater with his arms spread wide over the whole scene like he owned it. The caption read, "Everyone who matters, all under one roof. So thankful this year. Big things coming for this family. 300 likes already. Everyone who matters." I was 40 miles away, on a stranger's kitchen stool, and I was not in the photograph. I'll be honest with you. I felt the old hot thing rise up in my chest, the thing that wants to call and scream and demand. But I have learned that the hot thing has never once won me anything. It only ever told my enemies exactly where I was weak. So I let it rise, and I let it settle. And I thanked Carol, and I asked her to call me a car, and I went and found a hotel by the airport. I checked in, I hung up my ironed coat, and I sat on the edge of a stiff bed, and I took out the small notebook I have carried in my purse since Walter died. I write one line in it at the end of any day that tries to break me. That night, I wrote, "They built a table and called it Everyone. I will find out what they want before I let them know I'm not it." 'Cause that was the question now, wasn't it? Big things coming for this family. What big thing did they need an old woman flown in for, and then needed her gone for? David called at 9:40 that night. His voice came out of the phone, bright and easy, the voice of a man who has decided the floor is not on fire. "Mom!" "Hey, wait, did you come up? Whitney said you texted you couldn't make the flight." "I'm at a hotel by the airport, David," I said. "I knocked on your door for a while." A pause. I could hear a television and a woman's laugh behind him, and the woman's laugh stopped, the way a laugh stops when someone makes a face at it. Okay, this is a whole mix-up, he said. Whitney handled the dates. I thought we were all clear that, look, it doesn't matter. Just come down to the Pattersons tomorrow, okay? It's a beautiful place. Big day. We've actually got some stuff we wanted to talk to you about, real exciting stuff, but it's better in person. There it was. Stuff we wanted to talk to you about. The reason, wearing a party hat. What stuff, David? In person, Mom. Trust me, you're gonna love it. It's about the kids' future. Get some sleep, I'll text you the address. He hung up before I could answer, which is its own kind of answer. I sat with the phone in my lap, and I thought about Walter, who used to say that when a man tells you something is a surprise, it's because he's afraid of what you'll say if you see it coming. I did not sleep much, but I did not cry either. Somewhere between the airport and that hotel, the part of me that cries had gone quiet, and the part of me that adds had taken over. I drove a rental car to Rochester the next morning, Thanksgiving Day, because I wanted to see their faces when I walked in, and because I have never once gotten what I needed by staying away from the room. The Pattersons' house was big and new, and built to be photographed. Whitney opened the door in an apron she hadn't cooked in and said, "Eleanor, oh my gosh, we were so worried. What a crazy mix-up," and hugged me with her arms, but not her chest. The way you hug a coat you're about to hang up. Inside, it was warm and loud and smelled like sage. And my grandchildren ran to me, and that part, I will not lie, that part was real and good, and I held on to it. Ben was 12 and getting tall. Lucy buried her face in my coat. "Grandma, did you really sleep at the airport?" She whispered, and I said, "Just nearby, baby." And over her head I watched the adults arrange themselves. The tan man from the photo was Gerald Patterson, Whitney's father. He shook my hand with both of his and called me Eleanor, like we were old friends. Diane fussed and poured me wine. I didn't drink. David hovered. And after a meal where I was praised and toasted and seated in the good chair, a meal designed, I understand now, to soften me like butter left on a counter, Gerald said, "Eleanor, would you mind stepping into the study? Just the grown folks. We've got a little surprise." The grandchildren were sent to a basement with a movie, and on the desk in that study, waiting, was a folder. Here is where you lean in, the way I leaned in. Because everything before this was rudeness, and rudeness is survivable. What was in that folder was something else. Gerald slid it toward me and folded his hands. "We've been thinking a lot about legacy," he said, "about protecting what families build. Now, Eleanor, that lake parcel Walter left you, up in Crow Wing County, the 40 acres on the water." He smiled. "Beautiful piece of land. Just sitting there, doing nothing, costing you taxes every year. We think it's time the family put it to work." I kept my face very still. "It's not doing nothing, Gerald. It's where Walter and I were married. It's where we taught David to fish." Of course, he said, in the voice men use when they've already decided your sentiment is a problem to be managed. "But 40 acres of waterfront in this market. Eleanor, I have contacts. I have a developer who'd put a community out there. Docks, the whole thing. We're talking life-changing money for these grandkids." He tapped the folder. "Diane's brother is an estate attorney. He's drawn up a family trust. We move the land in. I manage it as trustee. We develop it the right way, and it all flows down to Ben and Lucy. You just sign here, and we take all the worry off your shoulders. It's a gift to you, really." I was still reading the first page when Whitney leaned across the desk, and the apron came off her voice entirely. "Eleanor, let's be honest with each other for once. You're 71. You live alone in the desert 2,000 miles from those kids. That land is going to sit there until you pass, and then it's going to be a mess of lawyers and taxes nobody asked for. We're handing you a clean way to actually do something for your grandchildren before it's too late. Most grandmothers would be grateful somebody finally made a plan." Before it's too late. She said it to my face, in front of my son, the way you'd point out an expiration date on milk. And David looked at the floor. I opened the rest of the folder. I am slow with documents on purpose. I read every line while they watched, and I felt David watching hardest of all. Not at me, but at the carpet. The trust named Gerald Patterson as sole trustee with full power to sell, develop, mortgage, and encumber the property. It listed Ben and Lucy as beneficiaries. Yes, but a beneficiary who is 9 years old has no say over a man who can sell the land out from under her tomorrow. And there, on the second page, a line that turned my stomach colder than that porch had, a reference to a valuation report dated October. They had already had my land appraised. Last month, before the invitation was ever sent. So the warm text, 3 days ago the kids miss you, stay the whole week that was not the beginning of anything. The beginning had happened in October, on my land, with a stranger's tape measure, without my knowing. The dinner was not a welcome. It was the closing meeting of a sale I had not agreed to. I closed the folder. This is a lot to think about, I said gently. It's a generous idea. Let me take it home and read it properly. I owe Walter that much. Gerald's smile thinned. We were really hoping to get this moving before the new year, Eleanor. There's a timing thing with the developer. Then the developer can wait until an old widow reads her own paperwork, I said, and I said it kindly, and I smiled, and that smile cost me more than they will ever know. I'll take this with me. I picked up the folder. Whitney's mouth opened. I stood before she could fill it. Now, let me go say goodbye to my grandbabies. I drove back to the hotel with the folder on the passenger seat, like a sleeping animal I didn't want to wake. And the whole way, one thought kept time with the wipers. They already measured it. They already measured my land. The disrespect at the airport had been a splinter. This was the knife. And the question was no longer, why did they strand me? The question was, how long have they been planning to take the one thing Walter left me? And how far have they already gone? I flew home to Tucson the next morning, 2 days early. I did not announce it. And here is where, if you've watched my stories before, you know what I did. I did nothing loud. I did the patient thing. I sat at my own kitchen table, in my own paid-for house, with the folder in front of me and Walter's chair empty across from me, and I waited. I waited 41 hours before I picked up the phone, not because I was afraid, but because I have learned that the urge to act fast is almost always the enemy of acting well. I needed the hot thing fully gone. I needed only the adding part left. Then I called Daniel Pruitt. Daniel had been Walter's attorney for 30 years, and he is 76 now, and meaner than ever about people who prey on widows. I laid it all out: the airport, the locked door, the folder, the October appraisal, and for a moment the line was so quiet I thought it had dropped. Eleanor, he said finally, read me the line on page 2, the valuation reference, word for word. I read it to him. Now go to your filing cabinet, Walter's deed box, bottom drawer, the green folder. I'll wait. I carried the phone down the hall and dug it out, my reading glasses sliding down my nose, and I read him the legal description off the deed, while he hummed to himself the way he does. Good, he said. Now listen to me very carefully, because they are counting on you not knowing what I'm about to tell you. Walter deeded that parcel to you alone. Sole owner. No joint tenancy, no liens, no co-trustee, nothing. Do you understand what that means? Tell me anyway, Daniel. It means their trust has exactly as much power over your land as I have over the moon, unless your name goes on it. They cannot cut one tree, sink one dock, or sell 1 square foot without your signature, which they do not have and are never going to get. I heard a chair creak as he leaned back. But the appraisal. Eleanor, that's the piece that lights up. To value 40 acres of waterfront properly, somebody walked it. Somebody stood on your dock. Did you, at any point, authorize a surveyor, an appraiser, or a developer to set foot on that property? Never, not once. There was a silence on the line. And then Daniel laughed, not a nice laugh, the laugh of an old wolf who has just smelled supper. Then they trespassed. They sent a man onto private property to put a price on land they don't own. To market it to a developer, it isn't theirs to market. Also, they could sit you down at a turkey dinner and hand you a pen. Eleanor, they didn't bring you a plan. They brought you a confession, and they stapled it to page 2. I sat down on the floor of my own hallway, deed in my lap, and for the first time since that cold step, I felt something other than dread. So, I don't have a problem, I said slowly. You have leverage, dear. The only question is whether you want to use it to hurt them or to wall yourself off from them forever. Those are not the same thing, and you have to choose before I draft a single word. I don't want to hurt anyone, I said. I want 3 things. I want that land protected so completely no one can ever do this to it again. I want it to go to both my grandchildren, equally, with no thumb on the scale. And then I want to be finished, quietly finished. Then put the kettle on, Daniel said. We're going to build you a wall those people couldn't climb with a ladder and a prayer. I want to tell you I felt triumph hanging up that phone. I didn't. I felt something quieter and sadder, which was the full understanding that my son had sat in that study and watched a man try to lift his mother's land out of her pocket, and had stared at the carpet. The land was never the deepest wound. David's eyes on the floor that was the wound. The land was just where it showed. We worked for 2 weeks, Daniel and I, mostly over the phone, and it was the most peaceful 2 weeks I'd had in years. One by one, I closed the doors. First, the land. We placed the 40 acres into a new irrevocable trust, the Walter Hayes Family Trust. I named it, and writing his name into the title felt like setting his picture back on the mantle. I did not name Gerald Patterson. I did not name Whitney. I named a neutral corporate trustee, a trust company that answers to law and not to family dinners. Both grandchildren, Ben and Lucy, were made equal beneficiaries. Equal, exactly, because Walter and I never once played our love like a card, and I would not start from the grave. And the trust held a condition with teeth. The land could not be sold, developed, mortgaged, or subdivided during the lifetimes of the beneficiaries, except by the unanimous written agreement of both of them, once each was a grown adult of 25 years. No man with a developer friend could ever again decide what happened to that water. But I did one more thing, and I did it carefully, because the life I've lived taught me long ago that you do not give a child a kingdom, you give them a responsibility. When Ben turns 25, he will not inherit $1 more than his sister, not 1 acre more. But he will be named the successor trustee, the keeper, the one who has to make sure the thing is protected, who answers to his sister and to the law and to his grandfather's memory. I chose Ben for that, not because I love him more, but because someone has to be the steward, and stewardship is work, not a prize. I wrote him a letter to be opened that year, explaining the difference, so he would never once mistake the job for a crown. Then I closed the smaller doors, the ones I found while finally looking through my own life with clear eyes. 2 years back, I had co-signed a car loan for David and Whitney, just for the rate. Mom, we'll refinance in 6 months. They never refinanced. My name was still on it, my credit still hostage to their payments. And my credit card, I discovered, was quietly attached to 2 streaming accounts and a wine club that arrived monthly at Whitney's door. I removed the card. The grandma utility was going offline. As for the car, I had Daniel put it in writing. And then, the wall finished, Daniel sent the letters that mattered. To David and Whitney, a short certified letter, certified, because certified mail is a thing a person cannot pretend they never received. It thanked them for the holiday. It declined, formally and finally, to participate in any trust drafted by the Patterson family. It informed them the lake parcel was now held in an irrevocable trust for the equal benefit of their children, beyond the reach of any party. And it gave David 90 days to refinance the vehicle into his own name alone, after which I would notify the lender in writing that I disputed any further obligation. To the Pattersons' estate attorney, Diane's brother Daniel sent a longer letter, the kind he enjoys. It noted that an appraisal had been performed on private property in October without the owner's authorization, that the owner considered this trespass, that any marketing of the parcel to third parties constituted a representation of land the Pattersons did not own, and that any further such activity would be pursued to the full extent the law allowed. I mailed them on a Tuesday. Then I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the sun and waited for the noise. Because there is always noise. The wall going up is never the end. The end is whether you can hold still while they throw themselves against it. The first call was David, 4 days later, and his easy voice was gone. "Mum, what is this?" "Gerald got a letter from a lawyer. Whitney's been crying all day." "You went to a lawyer?" "I read my paperwork, David. Just like I said I would." I said. "I made some decisions about my own land. The grandchildren are taken care of, equally and forever. You should be relieved." "You humiliated us," he said. And there it was, the only currency that family ever traded in, image. "Gerald did all this work. He had a developer lined up, and you make us look like we were trying to—" "Were you not?" I asked. It was the gentlest question I have ever asked. The line went quiet. The second wave came louder, and it came the way it always comes now, through screens. Whitney posted a long, weepy thing not naming me. But everyone knew about family members who abandon you at the holidays and then build legal walls against their own grandchildren's future. Diane shared it. A cousin I'd never met called to scold me and got a dial tone. The story out there was that I was a bitter, cold old woman hoarding land while my grandbabies went without. I did not answer it. You cannot win a fight with a story by telling a louder story. You win by being, very quietly, the truth, until the story runs out of air. And then the Pattersons made the mistake that ended it. Diane's brother, the estate attorney, wrote back. He must have decided that an old widow in the desert could be frightened with letterhead, because his reply landed in Daniel's office, threatening that I could face a claim for interfering with a family financial arrangement and alienating the grandchildren, and demanding I reconsider signing in the spirit of family. Daniel called me, and I could hear him grinning before he said a word. "Eleanor," they answered, and they put their threat in writing, which means I get to answer back, which is my favorite thing on this green earth. "Here is what I'm sending, with your permission." He read it to me, and I will give you the short of it. He informed Diane's brother that there was no family financial arrangement. There was an unauthorized appraisal of private property, which we were prepared to characterize, in any forum he liked, as trespass. He noted that representing that land to a developer as available for sale, when it belonged solely to me, raised questions her brother might not want a licensing board to ask. He attached a copy of the recorded deed and a copy of the new irrevocable trust, so there could be no confusion about who owned what. And he closed by inviting any further correspondence, since each letter they sent only added to a file I was keeping. The reply we got was 3 sentences long and arrived 9 days later. It withdrew the prior letter. It confirmed the Patterson family had no claim or interest in the property. It wished me well. I read it twice, and then I put it in the green folder with the deed, because Daniel had taught me that the most satisfying paperwork in the world is the paperwork in which your enemy signs his own surrender. The developer, Daniel told me, had walked away the day the word trespass entered the conversation. Developers fear paperwork the way the rest of us fear bad news. And Gerald Patterson, with no land to develop, lost all interest in being my friend, which told me everything about why he'd ever been one. The certified letter to David did its quiet work too. 90 days later, with the deadline breathing on him, he refinanced the car into his own name, and my credit was mine again, and I slept the way I had not slept in 2 years. But the wall was never really about Gerald, or the developer, or the land. While the noise burned itself out, I did the only thing that ever reaches the people who matter. I went around the whole war, straight to the children. I called Ben and Lucy on a Sunday, on the phone their mother had given them. "I want you both to know something," I told them, with Lucy's small breath against the receiver. "Grandpa's lake is going to be yours one day. Yours, the both of you, exactly the same. Nobody can sell it. Nobody can build on it. It's going to be there your whole lives, the water and the dock, and the place where I married your grandfather. And when you're grown, you can take your own babies fishing off that dock. I made sure of it. That's my Thanksgiving gift to you, even if it came late." Lucy said, "Are you mad at Mommy?" And I said the truest thing I had. "No, baby. I'm not mad at anybody. I'm just taking care of what's mine to take care of. That's a grown-up's whole job." The noise went out the way fires do when there's nothing left to feed them. And then, in February, David came alone. He didn't call ahead. I saw the rental car pull into my Tucson driveway, and I watched him sit in it for a long moment before he came to the door, the same way I'd once sat on his porch in the cold. I let him in. I made coffee. We sat at my kitchen table, in my paid-for house, with Walter's empty chair between us. And for the first time in years, there was nothing on the table, no folder, no agenda, no surprise. "I keep thinking about you on that step," he finally said, looking at his hands the way he'd looked at the Pattersons' carpet. "Carol called Whitney's phone that night. Whitney saw it. She said it could wait." He swallowed. "I knew you were there, Mom. By the time we were at dinner, I knew, and I let it sit. I didn't fill the silence. I have learnt that silence, handed back to the person who used it on you, finally weighs what it should." Gerald made it sound so smart. He went on. "Whitney's whole family, there's always a bigger house, a better plan, somebody getting ahead." And I thought, the land's just sitting there, and we could finally. He stopped. I told myself it was for the kids. "Was it?" I asked, again gently. "It is the only weapon I keep sharp." "No," he said, and that one word was worth more to me than the 40 acres. It was so I'd look like a man who provided. To them, I used your land to buy a feeling. He looked up at last, and his eyes were wet, and he was my boy again for a second, the one I taught to fish. "I'm sorry, Mom. Not for the trust. The trust is right. The kids are protected. I see it now. I'm sorry I let you sit on that step." I reached across Walter's empty place and put my hand over my son's hand. "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it, because forgiveness is not a door you have to leave open for everyone to walk back through. But the wall stays up. The land stays in the trust. You are always welcome at my table. Gerald's plans are not, and I will never again be flown somewhere to be softened first. Do you understand the difference?" He nodded. "I do." He stayed 2 days. He didn't ask for anything. Whitney did not come and did not call, and that is its own kind of answer, and I have made my peace with it. The grandchildren write me now, real letters, because I asked them to, because a child who learns to write to her grandmother is a child who will not lose her. Lucy draws the lake at the top of every one. The next Thanksgiving, I did not fly anywhere. I drove up to the lake, my lake, in its trust, safe in the warm part of October before the cold came, and I opened the old cabin and aired it out, and sat on the dock where Walter proposed. And I was not lonely, because I was finally, completely, in possession of my own life. I had a neighbour up there, a widow named Ruth, who'd lost her husband the same year I lost mine, and we sat on that dock with coffee and didn't say much, and didn't have to. That night, I took out the small notebook, the one I'd carried since Walter died, and I read back the line I'd written in that airport hotel. I will find out what they want before I let them know I'm not it. And I turned to a fresh page, and I wrote the line that closed the whole thing for me. They locked a door and thought they'd locked me out. They only locked themselves away from the one person who would never have taken anything from them. People ask me sometimes. Carol asks me, in our Christmas letters now, because Carol and I became real friends out of all this, whether I ever wanted to scream at them. At Gerald, at Whitney, at the table that didn't have my chair. And the answer is no, not because I'm a saint. I'm not. I wanted, on that cold porch, to bang on that door until my hands bled. But here is what 41 minutes on a stranger's step taught me, and what I'll leave you with. The people who try to take from you are counting on your noise. Your shouting tells them exactly where you're soft. Your fury becomes the story they tell about you to feel better about what they did. The quietest thing in the world is a woman who reads her own paperwork. The strongest thing in the world is a name on a deed that no one can move. They invited me for Thanksgiving, and I landed to silence and cold air and a locked door. And in the end, I was grateful for that door. Because a locked door tells you, before you've spent one more year of your love, exactly where you are not wanted, and frees you to go, at last, to the water that was always, only, yours. Sometimes dignity does not arrive with shouting.